In this video, I will be presenting a very intriguingly mysterious theory surrounding the events of Vatican II, that being the Cardinal Siri theory, and regards to John the 23rd's ties with Freemasons based off some interesting sources I've read, and I've decided to compile here. If anything happens to me after this video, a Mason or a witch was involved. Giuseppe Siri was born on the 20th of May, 1906. He was an Italian cardinal of the Catholic Church who served as the Archbishop of Genoa from 1946 to 1987, and he was elevated to the rank of cardinal in 1953. A protege of Pope Pius XII, he took part in the Second Vatican Council and was considered a papabile for 20 years. During the conclaves of 1958, 1963, August of 1978, and October 1978, as the leading conservative cardinal, while he was followed along with Vatican II, he also criticized it and expressed concern for the direction of the Church, which would take post-concilium. He passed away on May 2nd, 1989. One of the more captivating aspects of this is his papability. If you don't know what that means, he was worthy and eligible to be a pope, with a possible good chance of being elected. After the passing of Pope Pius XII, the conclave had an unusual result that confused everybody.
Cardinal Roncalli, the Patriarch of Venice, is the new Pope. And now, the new Pope makes his way onto the gallery to greet his people for the first time and to give his blessing to the city and the world. Pope John the 23rd.
As you can see, the smoke had turned black after white smoke emerged from the Sistine Chapel's chimney. Some theories have speculation around the bizarre incident, but the most notable one that sticks out more than the rest is the Cardinal Siri theory. The theory goes that Cardinal Siri, a conservative papabile cardinal, was elected by the College of Cardinals to the papacy, but he refused the office because, as the legend has it, the Freemasons that had infiltrated the church had pressured him to reject the papacy with threats. That is, according to the theory. The million-dollar question remains, how viable is this theory? Well, let's take a little dive at the candidate who surpassed Siri instead. That's Angelo Roncalli. Angelo Roncalli, also known as John the 23rd, was elected Pope on October 28, 1958, 2 days after the smoke incident occurred. John the 23rd soon initiated the Second Vatican Council, which changed the Church drastically and left an indelible legacy on every Catholic and the world today as we know it. And this is where things get rather dark. New teachings are introduced that caused so much controversy, confusion, such as religious liberty, collegiality, and even ecumenism, which resulted in backlash from prelates such as Archbishops Lefebvre and Thuc and Bishop Gerard de Lauriers, who wrote the Cassiciacum thesis. All three prelates had the same conclusion. Modernism had infiltrated the Vatican, and it was attributable to Judeo-Masonic figures within the Church. Now, John the 23rd is a very prominent suspect. In other words, he was suspected of being a practicing Freemason himself. There is even pictures of the then Angelo Roncalli receiving his cardinal biretta from an anti-clerical Mason and socialist Vincent Auriol, the first president of the Fourth French Republic. According to the Baron, Monsignor Roncalli perpetually became from that time his protector and confidant. During their long conversations, both in the Nunciature and the Marcedon's residence, they both spoke of the problems in the Order of Malta, of the relations between the Church and Masonry, of spiritual problems, of the rapprochement between the various Christian churches. According to Marcidon, Roncalli would have told him, "It is not so much the belief, or the lack thereof, in God which concerns me, but rather the true conception of Christ, above all with respect to the man Jesus." More notably, he was also attributed to be a deist in the same publication attributed to Burckhardt, who was a Swiss Freemason diplomat who identified Roncalli's character as a Masonic semblance, considering that Freemason has an inclination towards deism and rationalism, who refer to God as the grand architect of the universe, which leans to a deist perspective. He was reported taking initiation in a Parisian lodge, which, according to Vez Marcidon, who was a prominent French Freemason, had reported Roncalli telling him that he plans to remain in Freemasonry after his ordination, which, interestingly, he never condemned Freemasonry during his pontificate. And there is many more reasons and proof that I will link below this video that may allude to the Freemasonry of Cardinal Angelo Roncalli. Interestingly, Masons had a bright relationship with communists during the Cold War period, considering the Vatican-Kremlin Pact between John the 23rd and the Soviets, who controlled the Russian Orthodox Church at the time. And furthermore, the Second Vatican Council, which seems to have made statements on capitalism and colonialism and such of the like, but oddly kept silent about the biggest threat on Western Europe at the time, which was communism, because there was Russian Orthodox clergy present, apparently. While the Vatican Monsignors were smiling at the Russian schismatic representatives, many bishops were in prison and innumerable faithful were either persecuted or driven underground for their fidelity to the Holy Roman Catholic Church. How does this go back to Cardinal Siri? Cardinal Siri was very anti-communist and very critical of Vatican II and its reforms, hereby expressing concern for the direction it would go in and saying it would take a considerable amount of time for the church to repair itself. And there's a much darker story behind this than people give credit for. Cardinal Siri, as shown in the final months of his life, was allowed relative autonomy in his diocese as long as he kept quiet about the various conclaves. The remnant newspaper reported that churches in Genoa looked the same in 1989 as they had in 1940. Priests offered Mass facing the altars with no conciliar tables in sight, otherwise known as ad orientem. Siri was Genoa's active archbishop until he was 81, long after the mandatory retirement age of 75, normally imposed upon the diocesan bishops by the new church. But after granting an interview to Louis Remy regarding his 1963 election, Siri was forced into retirement 1 year and 9 months later. He was found dead. Interestingly enough, we also get this quote. Quote, Cardinal Tisserand reportedly admitted that irregularities did indeed occur at the 1958 conclave. Well, that would have to be the understatement of the time. Is the editor of Catholic Family News going to argue this thesis or not? Cardinal Tisserand's admission does not substantiate anything for either the pro or contra position. Indeed, this seemingly mild dismissal of legitimate concerns could be interpreted as a satanic betrayal on the order of a Judas kiss. This is the same Tisserand who in 1962, acting on the orders from anti-Pope John the 23rd, signed an agreement with the Metropolite Nicodem, a spokesman for the Kremlin, that allowed the invitation of Orthodox and KGB observers to the Second Vatican Council. This invitation was accepted on the condition that the council refrained from condemning communism. And John Venari thinks the damage control from the son of the widow admitting a few irregularities at the 1958 conclave somehow counters the Siri thesis. Give me a break. Unquote. Cardinal Siri had recounted that during the period of Vatican II was of great suffering for him and that he alludes to resenting it. The Cardinal Siri theory goes so far as to say that he was the true pope, during the time that Roncalli was the supposed pope. Allegedly, Cardinal Siri took on the name Gregory XVII. The UPI reports that he reported experiencing illnesses during Vatican II and could not read and speak simultaneously, and even collapsed when he spoke. Some sources say that there is a documented witness of Pope Gregory XVII as a virtual hostage to the Masonic orders in control of the Vatican. The persecuted pope's now well-known statement to Father Coate, who heroically got behind the enemy lines on June 14, 1988, quote, "They can kill me at any time," unquote, would seem to make no impression upon Vanari. Incredibly, it is unthinkable to the author of the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendia that a hostage would carry on as directed, even if he got a goal for his papacy, and that Pope Gregory XVII, or also known as Cardinal Siri, suffered under the threat of death for 31 years since he was supposedly elected in 1958. In 1954, Count della Torre, editor of the Vatican newspaper L'Osservatore Romano, warned Pius XII of Cardinal Angelo Roncalli's communist sympathies. Other members of the black nobility expressed similar concerns. Nor did Roncalli escape the attention of the FBI and the CIA. The agencies began to accumulate thick files on him and the questionable activities of other progressives within the Vatican, including Monsignor Giovanni Battista Montini, which would eventually become to be known as Paul VI. Here is an interesting excerpt from the former FBI consultant Paul Williams on his book The Vatican Exposed. Quote, Pius XII had appointed Cardinal Giuseppe Siri as his desired successor. Siri was rabidly anti-communist and an intransigent traditionalist in matters of church doctrine and a skilled bureaucrat. In 1958, on October 26th, when the cardinals were locked away in the Sistine Chapel to elect a new pope, mysterious events began to unfold. On the third ballot, Siri, according to FBI sources, obtained the necessary votes and was elected as Pope Gregory XVII. White smoke poured from the chimney of the chapel to inform the faithful that a new pope had been chosen. The news was announced with joy at 6 p.m. on Vatican radio. The announcer said, "Though smoke is white, there is absolutely no doubt that a pope has been elected," unquote. But the new pope failed to appear. Questions began to arise whether the smoke was white or gray. To quell such doubts, Monsignor Santaro, secretary of the Conclave of Cardinals, informed the press that smoke indeed had been white and that a new pope had been elected. The waiting continued. By evening, Vatican radio announced that the results remained uncertain. On October 27, 1958, the Houston Post headlined, "Cardinals fail to elect Pope in 4 ballots. Mix-up in smoke signals cause false reports." But the smoke reports had been valid. On the 4th ballot, according to FBI sources, Siri again obtained the necessary votes and thus was elected the Supreme Pontiff. But the French cardinals annulled the results, claiming that the election would cause widespread riots and the assassination of several prominent bishops behind the Iron Curtain. The cardinals opted to elect Federico Dedicini as a transitional pope, but Dedicini was too ill to accept the position. Finally, on the 3rd day of balloting, Roncalli received the necessary support to become Pope John the 23rd. Unquote. Here, Paul Williams seems to cite sources in the footnotes, which I will put on the screen. Please pause if you want to take a look. But due to the limited information on these claims, we cannot verify whether Williams's claims about what these documents say are accurate. However, The mix-up in smoke signals of the conclave of 1958 is a verifiable historical fact, recorded in the newspapers which reported on the conclave day of October 26, 1958, such as the New York Times and the Houston Post. And in the video that I showed earlier, I certainly do not have the smoking gun answer to the confusion of the 1958 conclave, but it is worth pointing out that this is the conclave that resulted in the creation of the Novus Ordo, Vatican II, and the entire modernist revolution that has turned what appears on the outside to be the Catholic Church entirely upside down and caused a branch of problems. This is the wraparounds of the Cardinal Siri theory and the undeniably darker side of Vatican II and Roncalli's pontificate that caused so many issues and ambiguities and remained unsolved or even completely unknown. Now, I am personally not a proponent of this theory, but looking at it from the perspective of someone who does hold to this thesis, it's definitely an interesting point of view, and I wouldn't completely discard the idea. It is a mystery that I will leave up in the air, and we won't know until further information comes out in the future or on the day of judgment. God bless.